Oh, well, too bad. Hi there, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. Um, I'm a little tired, but yeah, that happens to everybody. Did anybody miss me last week? If probably not, if nobody even noticed I was gone. I know I was not on vacation or anything fun. I actually had an electrical problem. First, my air conditioner went out. Then they try and got the air conditioner people to come out. They take a look at it and says it's not the air conditioning, it's the electricity because it's on a 220 line. And it was supposed to be getting 220 volts and it was only getting 109. So that means I had to have an electrician. And to make a long story shorter, I had to have the entire circuit breaker box replaced, the whole thing. And so I was at without power for over 6 hours, which was boring, actually. It's amazing how much stuff you can't get done when there's no power. How many times I wanted to do something, it's like, whoops, no light, no, get online, can't because there's no Wi-Fi. And it's also what I also discovered. It's amazing how hungry you get when you know you can't open the refrigerator to go get food. Normally, I'm not snack in the middle of the day, but suddenly I was hungry. Anyway, has that ever happened to you? Probably, but you know. So that's where I was last week. So anyway, what I want to do today is talk about testing. I know. Testing is a nasty four-letter word. I get that. But this is, in a sense, a kind of testing that you can do. But I want you to understand more about why it's beneficial. Well, to give you information, I'm not sure that anybody knows exactly why it's beneficial, what exactly the mechanisms are. But really what I want to do is explain a study that somebody did in the late 1930s, 1940, but still stands today. But it's a good example of exactly why or how this works. So this student was he was in school at the time and he was looking for a dissertation so he could get his PhD. And he took over 3,000 Iowa sixth graders and gave them all one of two lessons. Now, usually they're going to divide something up into different lessons because they don't want everybody to have the same lesson in case it's something to do with the lesson. So let's, for example, if you were going to be in a study and somebody did a reading and somebody else did math, the people who like math would do better on the math than they would on the reading and vice versa. So they try to mix up the studies to make sure that things are fairly equitable. In other words, everybody would get, given the example I just did, somebody would get some math and some reading, so that everybody had an equal chance to do well or not, as the case may be. Anyway, so they all had a particular thing to study, whatever that happened to be for them. That was it, just one day. What they didn't know is that the man's name was Spitzer, Dr. Spitzer. I guess Spitzer did this kind of on his own, just for the administration purposes, and put them into 6 groups, with different timings. One group, for example, got tested on that material like 3 weeks after they had had the lesson. Nobody said anything about the lesson. Nobody said anything about the material. They didn't even know that it was going to have a test on it. It's that they studied the material and then 3 weeks later they had a test on it. Another group had a test almost immediately after they studied it. Then they had another test the next day. And then I had another test 2 weeks later. Okay, so they got tested 3 times in 2 weeks. The other 4 groups got tested a variety of times during that 6-week period. Okay, at different times. So they all had exactly the same test, exactly the same questions. There was no difference other than the times and how many times they got tested and what was the latency. I mean, the difference between when they took or studied the material and when they took the test. Okay. The scores, or what on the test that Spitzer took when he gave them to the students to figure out, how much they could remember, varied greatly. Greatly. I think it makes sense that the students who got the test 3 weeks later did the poorest. They remembered the least. The students who got the best grades, in other words, they remembered almost half of everything that they had studied, were those students who got tested almost immediately, then a day later, and then within another 2 weeks. And so people have taken this particular study and done variations on it. And it seems that if you really want to learn something, you need to be tested on it periodically. Not to know exactly when you're going to do it, so that all those tests, if you had a teacher that gave you pop quizzes all the time, that teacher was helping you learn something. You might have learned to hate pop tests, but it was helping you because it was somehow forcing the mind to go over that material. So the idea that forcing the mind, and that's where it gets kind of fuzzy here, because when you're taking the test and you're looking at the paper and looking at the questions, your mind is having to go over that material. So if you want to call that forcing, in a sense that yes, it was. It wasn't like sitting down and saying, study this, some of you may have had parents or teachers or adults that sat you down and said, here, read this. And it wasn't forcing in that particular sense, but it was making the students think about that material again, even though they probably had no reason to do so other than taking the test. Okay. So that if you take something that you're trying to learn, whether it's a speech you're going to have to give, whether it's the material for your driver's test, whether it's whatever, if you study the material, then within a relatively short period of time, somewhere in that day, as close as possible after you studied it, go over and take a test on it, then do it within about 24 hours, then do it again within another 2 weeks, give or take. You will tend to remember about, give or take, 40 to 50% of that material without studying it other than taking the test. Okay? So that there's something about the test taking that reinforces and sticks that material into your head. Again, as I said, when you're taking the test, you are, in a sense, studying because you're having to go over and read that material, right? So, and when you're going to say, well, geez, I don't have a teacher. Yeah, you do. Flashcards, for example, are, in a sense, for this particular purpose, test taking. What I've noticed is that a lot of students will, for their idea of studying, is that they'll like take notes, and then what they do is they go out and read the notes. Don't just read whatever it is or read the material over or whatever. See if you can create a test. Now, when you're doing something like flashcards, I didn't think about that ahead of time. A lot of people will put flashcards and they'll have the stack of cards. And what they do is they read the first card, put it on the bottom, read the second card, put that on the bottom, read the third card. And what they're doing is they're basically just going through the set of cards in the same sequence. And if you've ever done this with a few flashcards, you will recognize sooner or later that what you've done is you've memorized the cards in sequence. So in other words, if you do the first card, you know the answer to the second card because you know that's what's coming, and you can give the answer to the first card, the second card, the third card, and the fourth card without moving the cards. This is not test taking. This is not good studying. Go through your flashcards and then shuffle them or drop them and pick them up randomly or something along that line. That would be a test that you could give to yourself. So you're taking the material and you're asking yourself questions that are out of sequence that you, in a sense, if you said drop the cards all over the floor and just started picking them up, or even better, somebody else picked them up and gave it to you and you'd have absolutely no clue what was coming next. That has something to do with how you put that material into your head and actually remember it better than if you're just going through it, the flashcards in sequence, okay? So that if you're trying to do something that you need to remember it for whatever reason, see if you can create some kind of test, and I'll put that in quotes. In other words, you're not getting graded on it necessarily from a teacher or anything else like that. Nobody has to know how well you did except you. And you're creating a test, so that may be just what I said earlier. You've got notes and you're reading them. Maybe at the end of a session, write down a few words and or ask some questions that you take and ask yourself like 2 or 3 days later. Do something that's going to work depending on the particular material that you're trying to learn, of how you can test it at a different rate or in a different place, so that you're not just going through reading that material over so that it becomes, in a sense, kind of like something on your refrigerator that it's been there for so long you don't see it anymore, kind of thing. So again, testing, and you can do this. Remember, this does not have to be a teacher-made test. If on some material, you might even be able to go online and see if there's a draft test or something like that you could take. If you're school material, it might be. If you're doing something for, like, say, a driver's test, there might be something like that online too. So you could explore that kind of option. So this gives you an effective way to go over and do some studying that you don't have to do every single day, because research has indicated that that's not necessary. But you go back and you pick it up every once in a while. So you could conceivably create a study plan that you learn something new on, let's say, Monday. You study it and take a test on Monday evening and then Tuesday and then a couple of weeks later. But this means on Wednesday and Thursday, you could start studying something new. Depending on the material, if they're really different sets of material, you can do this with different things because they're not really going to interlap. But if you've got similar material, then you have a problem. For example, if you were trying to study Spanish and French, it's entirely possible that if you tried to do it together at the same level, you'd sort of mix the words up and you'd end up with remembering Spanish words in your French class kind of thing. Yeah, it can be done, but it's a little trickier. Okay. So I hope this was helpful and I hope it made sense and I hope it gave some of you ideas. And again, try this out on your children if that's what the case is and they don't seem to remember. Give them their tests periodically. Just ask them questions, just in the hallway or something. They're going by and say, what's the capital of Ohio or whatever it is. And, they'll be able to learn it better that way. Okay. So again, I hope this was helpful. I hope it triggered some thoughts and we will chat with you later. Have a good day and a good week. Bye.